Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Dr. Judy WTF, What the Freud. And today we have a special guest and another special guest, and may I introduce them? So tonight's episode is on relationships, boundaries, and Hollywood. And we're very lucky to have with us Kelly Me Lee from Bling Empire.
Hi, Dr. Jody. How are you?
No, I keep thinking enterprises. And with us, we have with us Dr. Tracee Felice Williams. And I'm really honored to have you because, as I was saying earlier to you, women need to identify with other women and understand that we're just all human beings. So whether we're reality show stars or not reality show stars, we are all subject to childhood wounds and reactions and encodings. And so you're in a particularly interesting place in life because you've got a lot of cameras on you. And I'm imagining that it must be really hard to navigate boundaries and then the publicity and being relationship public and then the whole atmosphere of Hollywood. And Dr. Tracee has been treating uh, Kelly Me Lee. And thank you so much, Dr. Tracee. She's been with us at the Psychological Healing Center for several years. So welcome, Dr. Tracee.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure coming on again.
Yeah. So let's start with this. Maybe, Kelly, you can explain a little bit of the challenges that you're having with boundaries and relationships and being in the spotlight.
I think with boundaries is mostly because we were never taught that growing up. You know, it was never something that was very accepted, I think, and taught in our, especially in the Asian culture. So I always had a problem saying no. So even if sometimes I will overdo things just for other people, even though sometimes I'm too overexhausted, I will still say, okay, yes, I'll go to this event for you. Okay, I'll go to that event for you. Okay, I'll take this meeting. I'll take that meeting. And it was never like it's okay to set boundaries. And I was never taught that until recently. So I think that's one of my biggest problems that having, learn how to say no and learn how to set boundaries.
Yeah.
And also communicate that properly as well, because I never learned how to communicate that. It was always like, I will basically wait until I get kind of almost mad and without properly knowing how to communicate that clearly to the other party.
And what is your country of origin?
I'm Chinese.
Chinese, okay. And one of the things we deal with are cultural wounds. Each country has rules and norms and different ways that they treat their family and different levels of respect. And I think in the Chinese culture, it's a patriarchal culture. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
It is, okay. And so as you know, because you've been in therapy with Dr. Tracee, everything that is blueprinted in us comes from a cause. And that cause is our family of origin, mother, father, multi-generations. So if you've never watched the show before, I want to introduce everybody to the mind map, and then maybe we'll do a little bit of mind mapping. And Dr. Tracee, you can do a little bit of mind mapping on some of the core issues that you have discussed. And by the way, anytime you don't want to talk about something, just call it. This is your information, and you're entitled to, as you said, say no. Okay, and draw boundaries, because this is what the show is about. So what is the mind map? The mind map is a system that I created. If you could be so kind as to put it up so I can explain a little bit. It's divided into 9 panels, as you can see. And the 9 panels are divided into 3 sections. So I call these 3 sections the past encoding, the present day chaos, defenses, and breakdowns, and then where we're going, which is shifting out of all of the psychological pain, reprocessing emotions and then being the cause of a better outcome for part two, because it's not our fault. We don't have a choice as to who our parents are and the family we were born into. And unfortunately, these shadows overshadow our ability to manifest our greatness. So, Dr. Tracee, maybe you can talk a little bit about the journey that you and Kelly Mealy have been on, and if you don't mind map it a little bit.
Sure. Well, just want to say that with every culture, sometimes it's a kind of breaking part where you want to do therapy and when you don't want to do therapy. So when I first met Kelly, she was kind of apprehensive, like, what am I getting into? Is this going to really work? Is this going to help me? Right. And so in the beginning, especially at the Psychological Healing Center, we try to make it in a way of motivating, in the sense of, yes, finding the cause and not really blaming it on, generational wounds and things of that nature. So I identified with Kelly because, like I said, just like her culture, my culture, a lot of people don't seek therapy until like it's too late. So I appreciated Kelly coming in and starting the process, in the middle of great success and things of that nature.
That's
So when And so when we started, of course, we started with that panel one, which is the wounds, just getting to know her upbringing with mommy and daddy, understanding, how mommy played a part with her and with just her cognitive kind of understanding of life, right? Because when we come into the world, we're clean slate, right? And so we are understanding the things that we're taught and the things that we go through. So with Kelly, she understood some of the things that, her mom and father has put on her. And we try to not blame it so much on the parent, right? Because we're trying to get back to the cause to healing. So with doing that, then we moved on to the second panel, just reaction, because everything has a reaction. Kelly can kind of explain, what she wants to kind of disclose, I guess you can say, from that. But we went from the wound to everything, like you said, having some kind of reaction from it. And I love working with Dr. Judy in the mind map system, because some therapists can kind of stereotype things. Like, if you didn't have a father, ooh, you have father or daddy issues, right? But we want to understand in that panel too, how that affects you, right? What was your reaction, right? What did you take from it? What was those thought process and emotions and things of that nature? So I like that she meets people on an individual level. And then after that, we go into, oh, what is the belief system that we get from it, right? And so that's when Kelly started recognizing, these belief systems, the automatic triggers that she was just expressing when people say, hey, do you want to do this? It's like, I guess so, because that's when boundaries should have been placed. Right?
So, Kelly, I'd like to ask you, what did you learn about yourself from doing panels 1, 2, and 3? What were the discoveries?
Yeah, I think one of the things, obviously, I really appreciated was that, normally with therapy, I've had very small, but I've dipped into therapy before. And it was very much of like, let's just talk about things. And there was not a structure. So I really appreciate the fact that the mind map, there's a structure. So for me, I'm a very organized person. I like to know there's something like a destination we're going to, or there's, some kind of structure to it. So first of all, I really appreciate the mind map. And I think, you did such a phenomenal job, and obviously a lot of research and time has gone through in making this. I think, Dr. Tracee, I think one of the things maybe let's talk about that, I think was pretty, I guess one of the main things, I guess, in my childhood was, my dad leaving, even though he did leave a little bit later on my age. I was, almost 10 years old when he left, but it still affected me a lot. So I think we want to use that example, and we can talk about the womb reaction and coding from that.
So what do you think was the message if you're looking at panel number 3, which is the encoding, which actually means, from a mind map perspective, the cognitive message that you took in, because reactions are not necessarily cognitive. They're more the primitive brain. They're more pre-cognitions. But the cognitions are those messages. I'm not this enough. I'm not that enough. So what did you conclude as a little girl, and maybe as an adult still incorporated into your cognitions, what messages did you get from the treatment of what you went through in your family?
I, you know, for sure, I think there was a little bit, there was an abandonment issue for sure that I feel like I'm not safe. I think that's one of the things we talked about, as well as another thing was that I feel like I'm not good enough because the reason with my dad, but also with my mom, because, you know, it's always, nothing's ever good enough, you know, the tiger mom syndrome, like, oh my God, I got a 90 out of 10, so why don't you get 100, you know? But it's always, it's an 8. Well, you know the difference, it's not, you know. So, I think it's those two that's really like not good enough and not feeling safe. And then I think Dr. Tracee, one of the things we talked about was that always like I'm on a fight or flight like a mode, right?
Yeah, that's your reactions. Go ahead, Dr. Tracee, elaborate a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and it also, you know, just touching on both when she, you know, talked about, yes, mommy and daddy, but more so with that, it was the, you know, things had to be done a certain way, right? And that no patience with it, right? And then when daddy leaving, you know, which is supposed to be your outside world, right? That leads to all different feelings for a child, you know, why aren't you here? Where did you go? You know, if you have no patience and all these things and, you know, things done a certain way, comparison to other people. So then, you know, of course, the child's going to start comparing. Where's my daddy? Where's this? Where's that? Right. And so it just, you know, as time goes, what we all do as we grow is kind of suppress these feelings in a sense. And when we suppress these feelings, they are just staying within us, kind of like that disease, as you explained, Dr. Judy. And so
dis-ease,
dis-ease,
at ease, and
yes,
I really like the medical model, but I use the metaphor of biology to create psychological concepts. So the dis-ease is when we're not treated properly, and as I like to say, we're not sick, we're made sick.
Yeah, and so she was made sick in a sense because why aren't I enough for you to stay? Right?
Yeah,
you know, and then she looks at the outside world, you know, how can I count on people and things of that nature? Right? So I think, I mean, Kelly can elaborate on that, but it was just maybe an inconvenience of suppressing and just, you know, kind of closed off a lot of times.
And I think also a lot of time you don't realize you're going through that because it's all in the subconscious. So for consciously, you feel like you're fine, you're acting normal, you are just the way things are. But subconsciously, like exactly like you said, those things are going on. And then also one of the things I think also like I had a hard time letting go of people that are not supposed to be my life anymore. Like you know, and then just it could be friends, it could be anything. But I've always held on to bad things or anything because it's like I don't want to let them go, you know, because I'm like I don't want them to walk out of my life kind of thing, even though they should. Yeah.
So it's almost like the pain of letting go, and another trigger of abandonment is more painful than letting them go and freeing yourself from something that may not work for you. Something like that. Yeah. Okay. And so what's it like being in the spotlight in Hollywood? And so you've got these core beliefs that I know you're working through, that I'm not enough, not good enough, people can't trust people. And now you've got Hollywood basically tracking every move and perhaps even triggering. So maybe it would be interesting to see what kind of pressures you're under that act as triggers for you, that are challenges for you.
I mean, I try to live my life the way I want to because at the end of the day, I think it, you know, it's my life. But at the same time, it is hard with everybody commenting, you know. Obviously, last season of the show was really about my relationship with my ex-boyfriend. So like a lot of comments are just, I mean, we got thousands and thousands of people and their opinions about him, about me, about our relationship. And then, you know, so that was also really hard because some of the comments you're like, it's some of the comments where you're like, okay, I get where they're coming from. That's okay. Like, but majority of them, it's like, what you have, like, why do you think you know me? Because they see a little small part of it, like, but they have this whole picture made up of who you are already in their head. And some of the comments are, you know, I think majority of them are very, you know, they're very hurtful. But that's part of it. And, you know, my advice for anybody else is just try not to look at them. And there's really no, I mean, for sure, there was also some instance I want to go and reply back, like, you know, because I'm like, you have this whole thing under, you know, you have this whole thing, you know, you're not understanding this whole thing. You got this whole thing wrong. But it's not worth it. And at the end of the day, you know, it's the best way just to ignore it. But also other people don't realize is that, you know, we are humans as well. We have feelings as well. And we do read these comments.
So how real is the reality show? People often wonder, well, you know, there are editors involved and people have their goals and agendas and so on. And so they're going to angle things from a certain point of view. So when you look at it and think, wow, this really represents me, or my goodness, this doesn't represent me.
You can never control how the editing is, but you know, like as far as did I say those things, if I didn't say it, they wouldn't be able to record it, right?
That's true.
So however you want to put it, however you want to spin it. But yes, editing has a lot to do with it. And they have a short few minutes to get a point across, and they need to make sure everything they put in those things get those messages across. Does it represent me? Yes, of course it represents part of me because that I did say those things, I did do those things. Mm-hmm. However, again, people have to realize it's a small part. It's a part of you, but it's not a whole you. So does it represent the whole me? Absolutely not.
So how do you navigate boundaries in relationships? You're a young, beautiful woman and you're single, correct? Mm-hmm. And so how do you do that when the world is in your face telling you that you're, you know, commenting whatever comments they're making? How do you carve out privacy? That would be the boundaries.
I think for me, it's just really about staying grounded and staying to my morals and to my values and for the things I learned. And also, you know, with people like Dr. Tracee around me and, you know, as a resource and just putting great people around you. That's how really you can get through it. Because at the end of the day, like, we can't control other people. We can't control what they say to you. We can't control how they judge you. You can only control yourself. So for me, it's just about make sure I surround myself with great people and just stay grounded and then also know that, like, a lot of time what they're saying to you, or if it's anything mean, it doesn't really, they might be having a bad day or
right.
or whatever, you know, my situation might have relate or trigger them
from so true.
From a previous experience. So that stuff I can't control. The only thing I can control is just myself and how I look at things. And, you know, obviously it's a lot easier said than done, but, you know, I'm still learning every day.
But that's why we worked on those, what do we do, life defense in the moment, right? That always gets all of my clients in the moment. What can we do to calm ourselves down?
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about, Dr. Tracee and I talked about, was in the moment, if something kind of feels, you know, I feel triggered or anything, one of the things is like maybe excuse myself to go get a glass of water or to go to the bathroom or just kind of pause a little bit and just kind of pull myself away from the situation. It's extremely helpful because at the end of the day, like when your emotion kind of is like really heightened, it kind of takes over the logical side of your brain, right? So we want to, yeah.
No, I was just going to say that if you're triggered, and one of our goals is to dismantle your negative core beliefs because they're based on lies and misperceptions. So it's sort of like unplugging the minefield. Okay, mm-hmm. So we dismantle the bomb, so to speak. They can push and push and push on it, and it's like, okay, if that's what you think, then that's what you think. One of my favorite lines is from a book called The Fountainhead, Ayn Rand. I'm sure a lot of people know about it. And there's this architect who's very, very unique, and he doesn't beat at any on the path of anybody else's drum but his own. And so a character says to him, "So Howard, what do you think about me?" And he says, "I don't think."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is such a beautiful example to me, because that person has this core sense of self, and whatever other people think about him is either a projection of their pain or their trigger, or even if it's a clarity thing, unless you want that person to give you honest, rigorous feedback, then it's not really a great thing to get people's unsolicited opinions about anybody.
Right.
Right. So where Dr. Tracee, where are you in your work with Kelly Mealy?
So, because there's been a little bit of things that happen, like life, right? Sometimes we have to pause through the mind map, which is okay, because that's what I tell everybody. We're working at her pace, right? And so, therefore, we are basically between 6 and 7. We're like 5, 6, and 7. So we're jumping around there with respect to how do we soothe, like you said, dismantling the negative core beliefs, saying this is a lie. What do we do in the moment? How do we take care of ourselves just like a baby, like with a pacifier, right? We have to calm it. We have to tell ourselves, don't blame, don't shame, don't put guilt on yourself. You know who you are, right? And so that's like, especially what Kelly said about self-care, self-worth. Self-worth, if we look that up, self-esteem, what does that mean? That means having confidence that a lot of the belief systems, right? We have good and we have bad, the ones that are negative, right? And so we work on that, and then we do the role play, right? And I love the role play because Dr. Judy has even showed me way many years ago that that's what we kind of put everything together. Panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, panel 4, panel 5. Like, have you been paying attention? Because you can be sitting right here on this podcast and be like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Oh my God, that makes sense. But now let's use it. Let's use it with Tracee, Dr. Tracee, that puts everything back on you, right? Everything of the negative that you kind of told me, and let's use it, and let's play with it, and let's fight through it. That's self-esteem. And then we look at other people. So we're kind of going back and forth with that role play and just understanding how to soothe ourselves, and then understanding, like she said, we might be triggering other people. You know, the tiger mom in us might be getting on someone else just because we're trying to meet a deadline. So we're not trying to be mean to you, but someone else might be like, I don't have to listen to this. And so they start projecting, right? So there has to be a point where you pull yourself away, go get a glass of water, so that you do continuously dismantle the negative core beliefs.
And by the way, everyone, I want you to know that Dr. Tracee is trauma trained. You worked at the VA hospital, yes?
Yes.
And you have a lot of experience with complex PTSD, which I define as unprocessed childhood wounds. Because PTSD is straight up, if you got in a car accident, had a gun held to your head, of course you're going to go into this shock and trauma, but that complex PTSD is the tricky stuff. And that's why it's so important to go to the cause, because I like to play psychological detective. And I've taught the people on the team, such as Dr. Tracee, to play psychological detective, because we show up with symptoms. So we don't know the cause. So let's say I ask you, hey, Kelly, what happened to you at age 1 or 6 months or 1.5 or 2? You probably look at me and go, duh, I don't know. But how do we know? Because the symptoms are the hieroglyphics that point to the cause. So when we see people come in with anxiety or depression or OCD or paranoia, we know that something happened. And just like a good psychological detective, we've got to trace it back to the original blueprint of what happened there. Did mother-daughter disconnect? And back to Bowlby. I love Dr. John Bowlby. He really is foundational, because he's the person who highlighted how important it is to have eye contact, skin contact, mirroring, attunement. If we don't get that, then we feel disconnected from our primary caregivers, and then we're disconnected from ourselves. And then we've got to start building what I call the big I, which is eventually the self-actualized best of your best. Because when we're wounded, everything gets the ceiling isn't as high as it can go. It starts to suppress the expression of your authentic self.
Yeah.
And I also want to open it up to the audience. I know we've been talking quite a bit, and I'm sure that there are people out there who are really curious about your process and may have some questions to ask. So audience, this is a call-in show. We'll keep the call-ins short just because we've got a lot of things to say, and please do feel free to pick up the phone and call in and ask questions of Dr. Tracee or Kelly Neely or myself. And so, Kurt, if we have any call-ins, I know you let us know. Okay, so let's talk in the meantime about panel 6, because panel 6 is where the rubber meets the road. What do I mean by that? Just like Dr. Tracee was saying, is everything from 1, 2, 3, 4, let's go through it again. Wounds of childhood, reactions, encoding, and if we press on that lever, boom, 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 chaos, defenses, breakdowns. Do we have a call-in?
No, we don't.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you see the mind map is not just panel 1 is an end in and of itself. It's all connected. So by panel 6, we're really reprocessing these feelings that have been either projected on other people or swallowed, meaning that we swallow those feelings. And so it all either is the depression and suppression, or it's the projection and the anger. So if you look at panel number 6, you see a clash. So it's either an internal implosion or an external explosion. And so what we have to do with those feelings is not only recognize where they came from, we have to do what you call the role play, which is we have to process the anger, the betrayal, the sadness, the confusion, the gaslighting, which is a lot of betrayal. And so unless we process those feelings, then we will either implode with it and become depressed, or explode with it and become, well, on the extreme side, violent, verbally violent, physically violent. So that's why it's so important to process these feelings. And that's where the CPTSD starts to get resolved. You want to add to that, Dr. Tracee or Kelly Neely?
So I also want to just say, because since the topic is Hollywood, that helps with staying grounded, right? Because in that panel 6, when we kind of put everything together, I show my clients that this can be somebody, you know, within the whole Hollywood. And I just want to take a minute, because during this time, during this pandemic, there has been a lot of suicides within Hollywood. And it is because, you know, people that, like Kelly said, does not know really what's going on with someone else, right? And so when I do my role play, I'm, as Dr. Judy said, I'm the best actress because I am coming at a good place though. We have fun with it, but I am at a place where, yeah, I'm going to be that person that, you know, hides behind the computer and, you know, says these mean things, where you have to kind of check yourself, right? As my one client says, check yourself before you wreck yourself. You have to check yourself and say, wait. You know, this person is just trying to get my attention, or this person, whatever, is having a bad day, right? And so in that panel 6, just like you said, within Hollywood, I take it very serious. I take it very serious because it is affecting a lot of people. It's affecting a lot of people when, you know, the camera goes off. It affects a lot of people when they go home to their family. And, you know, Kelly can just, you know, talk on that. But that panel 6 is exactly what you were saying. It helps with that.
And I want to talk a little bit about narcissism, because somehow through the course of the years, I've been receiving a lot of calls from people saying, oh, my husband's a narcissist, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my brother, my sister, my mother, my father. So my definition of narcissism is a system gone wrong where the parents put their own feelings before their child's feelings. And there's a lack of empathy. And so one of the things that I think, and you can tell me more about this, Kelly Mealy, is that in Hollywood, it sort of invites the demean, the devalue, and the destroy because there's a competitive edge. So if you're more beautiful and someone's less beautiful, then the narcissistic wounds may be triggered, and let's get her right there and tell her that her ears are too big or her nose is too small or whatever. I'm just wondering, what's your experience, because you are out there and beautiful and desirable. And so what do you find about inviting envy and the people who just can't stand to have a public figure that triggers in them, well, I'm not as good as she is, I'm not as famous, I'm not as young, I'm not as beautiful. So what do you find comes up around that?
I think like one of the things you guys talk about, it is very true. Hollywood is very, very cutthroat. It's very competitive, and every person is like, there's 1,000 person fighting for the same job, and
Yes.
you're only as good as your last job, and it's not something long term because after this job is done, you got to go look for another job. I can only imagine what like as far as a lot of actors and actresses are going through, and also some people behind camera. The reason I said I can only imagine because I've always created my own projects. So in a way, I've had control with my own quote unquote destiny in a sense where, Bling Empire was I was the one who started, putting this project together as well as all my other movies and films. I I put things together. So for me, I had a little bit more control over with my work because I find work myself, because that's what an entrepreneur does. And but at the same time, I can 100% just feel that feeling is not a good feeling of feeling you're not good enough and feeling that, and doesn't matter what you do, you're not good enough. And that's a really hard feeling. And as far as what you guys talked about as well, being a public figure, and people might compare themselves. For me, I think one of the things I really try my best to do is be as raw and real as possible. So if you look at my show, season 1 of my show, I'm the only person I think there's other couple, but I try to, you see me without makeup, you see me glammed up, you see me just rolling out of bed, literally not washing my face and just getting off of
That's what I love about you, Kelly. That's what I love.
You see me cry really ugly, So I think, showing the human side of things, and I'm really happy. I think now the media has been changing to the same direction because, years ago, you had an image to put out, but now that I feel like because of social media and because audience really do connect with the rawness and, and the human side of these public figures that, I think more and more you're breaking that smoke and mirror, right? The smoke and mirror that old Hollywood tries so hard to keep up. Where now, you see public figures posting pictures without, their makeup, and you see their skin has acne just like everybody else, and you see them dealing with issues that everybody else deals with. And that's also why I think the show was very special to me, just because all of us on the show were very vulnerable. We talked about real life problems that people can relate to. It doesn't matter how rich or how poor or what status you are, like it doesn't matter. We all deal with real life problems. So that's why I think the show is very unique and special.
And the fact that you were involved in the production, right? So you do have control over it, and you can interface with your audience and your fans, and people will ask away, and then you can become vulnerable with your audience even when you're not doing the show.
Yeah, and then one of the things I do want to just point out is that when you say I have control over, which I actually had no control over,
Okay.
because you know, being a scripted producer, when my other projects, I know the beginning, middle, and end.
Okay.
When I decided to, you know, be on camera with this project, unfortunately, because of I have to stay present and be vulnerable. I actually had no control of the editing. I took myself out completely from the back end of it. So I actually I saw the show when it came out, just like everyone else. So I actually did not see an earlier cut. You know, so that was actually very challenging for me, just because I've always been in very much control of my life, you know, just like I talked about as you know, I had the control of creating this job for me, or creating this life for me. That's what you kind of, that's what I meant before. But where, you know, all my other jobs, all my other projects, I have a lot more control over things. But for this one with Bling Empire, I had to completely let go of control and just trust the process.
Wow. Okay. And by the way, everyone, if you want a free copy of the PDF, Be the Cause Healing Human Disconnect, it is free. Grab a copy of that. And if you need help 24/7, then you can access that little button over there and receive help from our center. We offer 15-minute free consultations. And as you were saying, Kelly, this is a very organized kind of therapy. We don't leave anything to a mystery. As a matter of fact, when you see the plan, you see the beginning and the middle and the end. So it's almost like you already know the last chapter of the process, which is integration and synergy and recoding into health, and then creating a better part two of your life. And I'm just wondering, and Dr. Tracee, also feedback from you, what do you feel has shifted? Because we're big on the word paradigm shift. Everybody wants to have a paradigm shift. We don't want to just change our behaviors or change our cognitions. We want something to actually shift in terms of a new way of seeing the world and ourselves, a new way of being in the world. So what have you noticed for yourself is or has shifted for you?
So, answering that for Kelly, right?
Sure.
Well, I've noticed just with Kelly, working with Kelly, she has really claimed her power, like in that with communication. Every time if I watch her or she sends me something, I am so happy that she's pushing those boundaries, you know, in a loving way. So it's not just like, oh, I'm not doing this with you, or she's not gone to that extreme. She knows how to negotiate. She knows that she can, you know, say other things than just yes or no, right? She understands people have their own trauma, like I just said. So that paradigm shift of understanding things, it did come from mommy and daddy, right? But however, even though it came from mommy and daddy, how do I be the cause to now say these negative core beliefs are a lie? This is a lie. So anything that's put on me, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's relationships, whatever it is, I have to really like turn inside and have that paradigm shift over and over again, right? To say, you know what? I am better than this. I'm better than this. I am somebody that is kind and everything that you just said, beautiful, right? In my way, right? So anybody that puts on media or anything about, you know, you're this or you're that, or you're just not enough, I'm working with Kelly for her to understand, no, I'm enough. I'm enough for me. You know, everybody on this planet is unique. Everybody on this planet has a purpose, and that's me. I'm enough. I'm good at what I'm doing. This is what I love to do. And so I'm going to push it through. So she also learned that, just like she said, sometimes we don't have control of things. That is hard when we don't have control of things, right? And that can happen in Hollywood. But she knows how to say, okay, let me sit back and kind of observe. Let me see, you know, and still put my boundaries if I don't want this, or maybe how can I, as I always tell my clients, checkmate, right? How do we use the frontal lobe and kind of execute this as a plan, right? We might have to go around, go through the back door, right? So she's really learned how to kind of navigate and understand her power and her communication skills. And like I said, we're still working on that, how to cope ensued when things kind of trigger us.
So we do have a little bit of time left, and I want to invite the audience to
We actually
call
have a
in.
call.
Oh, beautiful. Hi, you're on the show, Dr. Judy WTF. And who am I talking to, please?
Hi, I'm Manya, and I'm from Canada.
Hi, Manya. How you doing? Nice to hear from you.
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Good to be here. So good.
And how do you relate to tonight's topic? And we're really honored to have both Dr. Tracee and Kelly Mealy on. And if you'd like to ask them questions, please do.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very moved listening to Kelly and how strong she is as such a young, beautiful woman, and how strong she is in her self-identity, and how beautifully she articulates with the support of Dr. Tracee. And it's very moving. I'm almost 60 years old, and I have had a hard time. Like just last night, I had terrible nightmares, just awful nightmares. And I own the mindmap series, and I did it by myself, and I read the book, and it changed the trajectory of my life. But occasionally when I'm feeling very vulnerable, I still have terrifying nightmares, you know? I do, yeah.
And you know,
and I'm really not sure.
You know, I was just going to say,
I'm sorry?
Isn't some kind of a magic pill. I see it as a way to get out of the dark hole that we often, maybe every day, I fall in quite often, and it just gives me a pathway out. So it's not like you're never going to feel depressed, and you're never going to feel anxious, and you're never going to be triggered. That would be absolutely ridiculous, and who can achieve such goals? Okay, but we can soften the amygdala, we can soften everything, we can process these feelings so they don't live as deeply in there and create the symptoms. But just what you're saying, Monia, that okay, so you have nightmares, right? Doesn't everybody have occasional nightmares? But do you find that you can crawl out of the hole quicker with a system?
Totally. I have to say, I wasn't exaggerating that it changed my life and gave me access to my inner resources. No, I'd have to say my whole life before mindmap was very dark. It just, as hard as I worked, and I even went into psychoanalysis with a Kleinian, like I did everything I could, you know. I studied family therapy, but I was always in that kind of complex post-traumatic stress reaction. Like I was often fragmenting and just kind of, I felt like Humpty Dumpty, like I was literally just gluing myself together, but I never feel like that anymore, except it was terrible nightmares last night. Like it was like I was shaking and frightened, and I'd have to say probably fragmenting somewhat, you know, which is kind of embarrassing, eh?
And human. And again, we go back to those dark places, and sometimes we have to play them over and over, just like the WTF. It's the repetition principle to show us that we can go there and then come out of it with more awareness. I call these things cursed by design, whether it's somebody insulting you, or a challenge, or a nightmare, or anything that challenges us. If we have a system, a way to process it, and then self-reflect and self-correct, that's pretty powerful. And that moves us ahead of where we were before.
Then, Lana, this is Kelly. Thank you so much for the kind words you said. And obviously for me, it's a work in progress. I think it's for everybody. It's never going to be, you know, it's never going to be perfect. It's always going to be a work in progress. You know, I'm sorry you've been having these nightmares. I think, you know, one of the tricks, I don't know if it might work or help a little bit. One of the things I do is that an hour before I go to bed, I know I go to bed at the same time every single day, so I have a set schedule for it. The hour before, I don't read news. I don't look at my social media. I don't look at my phone. I tend to just look in or watch something. I tend to read something a little bit more uplifting and happier. I don't really watch TV an hour before, and I kind of turn off all the blue light stuff around my house. But your mind also, you know, hour before bed, if there's ways to kind of slow it down and calm down and then fill it with a little bit more lighter stuff. I don't know if it'll help a little bit, but for me, yeah, I used to, you know, take my phone to bed. I used to read news, and I used to watch movies who are very exciting and maybe horror films. And I realized the hour before bed is not the time to do it. My mind needs to slow down and needs to be in a happy and peaceful place.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't tried that, but I think it will work for me. I think that as you were speaking, I recognized that I did have something upset me terribly.
Mm.
I just kind of kept pushing it down all day. I knew my birthday was coming, and my husband had just died of COVID 10 months ago. And it was such an awful death. And he was so frightened that when I think of those last, his last days of life, his last weeks of life,
Yeah.
I freak out. And so I try not to think about it, and I won't. I don't think it's a good idea to me to think about it before bed. I just don't think it is.
And take it easy on yourself too, because it's such a long, I mean, what you went through, it's so traumatic. It's going to be a really long healing process. So, you know, take the proper step, take the proper healing time, and, you know, take it easy on yourself as well. It's, we're so sorry to hear that you had to go through that.
Yes, I'm really, my condolences to you. I didn't realize it was so recent. You said a month ago, 2 months ago?
10 months ago, I think.
Oh, no, it was 10 months ago.
10 months ago, okay. And so.
Yeah, but you know, when I remember him, I still see him grasping for air, and he was so frightened.
Yeah.
So just respect that there's this grieving process, and it's very scary because COVID has been the number one concern across the world. And when we see people and know people as yourself, but your husband gasping for air, we know that it could happen to any one of us. And so not only are you looking in horror at what's happening to your husband, but also, you know, can't help but to think, wow, could that happen to me? And it's just scary, no matter how how strong or smart. And I know now people are getting vaccinated, and that's been a big relief for so many. But do respect your grieving process. It's very intense. We'll take this time.
And it's woken up so many of those early childhood memories of vulnerability, and also, I don't know why, but I've gotten so sick since he died. And but even though he was diabetic before he died, so I was taking care of him a lot. I wasn't sick until after he died. And lately I've been really sick. Like I was hospitalized with asthma attack and all kinds of stuff that I haven't had since I was a kid.
So, yeah, this is a huge trigger. And so, again, I invite you to call me if you need support. I have a wonderful staff. And, you know, Kelly, I've never met you before, but one of the things that I'm struck by is your kindness. You're such a sweet person, and for you to come on air and talk about mental health is really, really big. And a lot of people will be watching you and saying to themselves, well, okay, if she can open up her vulnerability and take a risk, publicly take a risk to grow, maybe I can do that also. So Monia, please feel free to reach out, and thank you all.
I will. And Kelly is my hero. Kelly really is my hero, because I mean, she's there articulating at such a young age, so beautifully and compassionately, with such strength. And I want to do that too. I would like to I would like to, even at my age, I want to come to that place of such solidity. Yeah. Such beautiful strength.
And you will too. Take it day by day. It's going to get better. Just know that a lot of things you're feeling, a lot of the pain you're feeling, it is temporary. Just take it day by day, hour by hour. You will get through it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in.
And thank you, Dr. Tracee and Dr. Judy. I can't even tell you how much better my life is since, watching and doing the mind map and reading the book and studying it and listening in. Yeah, I've grown so much. And now I have a lot more hope even. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you.
And I'll take it from there that when people go through this process, part of the mind map, panel 789, is about paying it forward. So look, when we receive the light from other people, Kelly, when you're receiving the light from Dr. Tracee, and then you feel these shifts happening in you, and because you happen to be a kind and empathic person, and I can't tell you how rare empathy has become on the planet. It's like, what happened to empathy? And so when people have it, right, it's so important that those people share this, this pay it forward to other people. And that's one of the things that I learned. And by the way, I just want to say that the mind map was inspired by my study of Kabbalah. I don't know how many people know that, but it's true. And today is Lag Bomer, which is a special Jewish holiday. And it also is honoring Rev Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar. And so I can't help but remember that, because today is that day. And Rev Shimon Bar Yochai taught me so much. And one of the things that I learned from the wisdom is that we receive the light in order to share the light. Okay, and that's the opposite of narcissism. So if we're just receiving, and we're vampiring everything from everyone else, well, we might get rich in the pocket, but very, very poor in the soul. And a lot of why that happens is because people have a hole in the soul, and they think that by filling it, that something's going to fill up, and it doesn't. It just drains out, bottomless pit. And so I think this concept of getting the light and then being shifted by this wisdom and then paying it forward, because that's a big goal of the mind map, is paying it forward to the next generation so we could stop the multi-generational crazy. I call it the psychovirus. And if we don't blueprint something really, really beautiful and empathic and empowering to the next generation, then we can expect to have more symptoms, more defense mechanisms, and so on. And so one of my personal goals is to get it into the school system. So did you hear that, Dr. Tracee? You've got to help.
That's what we're about to do. They're starting to open up.
That honestly would be so amazing. That honestly would be so great. And then one of the things, we didn't learn any of this stuff in school. Like, I really wish we did. If I knew the knowledge, even part of the knowledge I knew now when I was way younger, things would have been a lot better. My life would have switched a lot earlier. So yes.
Imagine little children who get encoded by their parents, you're stupid, you're ugly, you shouldn't have been born, and go to school and learn the mind map and learn that this information is not who they are, but the messages of what they're receiving, and they're able to now identify it versus identify with it. Imagine the life saving of that. Just that knowledge, and that's what I want to impart. And I'm hoping in my lifetime I'll be able to get into school systems, which is hard because it's a lot of red tape and so on and so forth. And then we've got the other part, which is maybe parents will not want their children to know that they're not
be strong and communicate.
Okay, so we're going to work on that this year, Dr. Tracee. Okay, I really want to see that happen, and I much appreciate you sharing with us and being a role model to so many women who are listening, and of course all your fans. Is there anything more that you want to say, Kelly Lee or Dr. Tracee?
I just want to thank Dr. Tracee and Dr. Jody for having me on, and obviously for writing this book. I've read this book. I think the first time I read it was about, I think, a year and a half ago. I need to reread it again, but it's phenomenal. That's why I talk about it all the time in a lot of my interviews and press, just because there's so much information on there, everything connected. When I was reading this book, there was a lot of pieces in my mind, but when I was reading the book, the things were start connecting, things are start making sense. So I really, again, I'm not getting like I have no benefit with it whatsoever. I really suggest everybody to go read a book, especially Dr. Jody's giving me a free copy, so there's nothing to lose. And I even actually send your copy to a couple of people who's DM'd me, asking, going through issues, and like, read this book. I think it's really going to change your life. And also another thing is that, removing the stigma for therapy. We have to remove the stigma for therapy.
Yes.
Not just in culture, not just in any, but just in general worldwide, just because it does not mean something's wrong with you when you're seeking mental health guidance. It's everybody should do it. Everybody should take care of your mind, because that's your machine. That's your engine for your machine, for everything else. Your mind's connected to your body. Your mind's connected to everything you do. So, I love that you guys are doing the podcast, and, let's keep spreading the message and keep destigmatize mental health. And the first step is awareness and education, and you guys are doing it. And, I'm happy to be part of it.
I really appreciate it, and that PDF is free. So I'm inviting you to invite everyone, all your fans, to grab a free copy of it and pay it forward. And some people will not partake in therapy. And sometimes I have people years later, they've read my book years ago. Oh, now I'm ready. So people are like unripe bananas, but eventually we ripen, or something happens in our life, and it creates maybe a crisis. I call it a curse by design. And then I get that phone call like, okay, let's do it. Let's go.
And also a lot of time, I think people don't realize that they don't see the connection. If something's going on with their life, one part of it, they didn't realize if they, the connection of the past, it's the effect to the current situation, right?
Exactly.
That's why the book cover has the DNA strand, which is the blueprint, and all those little dots, because we're connecting the dots multi-generationally.
Yeah. And this is also fixing the core. A lot of time we put band-aids on our problems. We're like, okay, I'm feeling like this thing triggers me. I'm feeling stressed about this thing. Let me go have a drink, or let me go and take a pill, whatever it is. But you're still not fixing the core problem. So having to fix the core problem is reading this book, calling you guys, and speaking to, professionals like you guys.
I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me to have you on the show tonight. Thank you again for being so vulnerable and being a part of being a role model to other women and humans in general. And Dr. Tracee, you've been such a great team member. I've known you for, I don't know, what, 5, 6, 7 years now, right?
Well, it's been a while. You've seen me grow.
Definitely. And one of the qualities that I look for with team members, there are people that have come and gone from the Psychological Healing Center, and the people who stay, I've noticed, are the people with the deepest level of empathy, because you can't really teach that. And without that, I don't think that a person could be a true healer. Maybe they could be a true intellect, but if they're lacking that human connectivity, it's just not the same. So thank you for being a beautiful person and a smart woman and a strong woman. And Kelly Lee, I hope that on some occasion you could come back and visit the show. And appreciate
that. It would be my pleasure.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much for just sharing. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys. Take care. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.